Yun, mga kameta, kamusta kayo dyan? It's not you, it's me. Ayan naman tayo, mga hugot lines. It's not the dollar, it's not the peso, it's the peso, not the peso. Ayan, pag-usapan natin guys, etong issue ng dollar, peso, ano ba? Is it you or is it me? Ano bang mga hugot lines natin dyan dito sa really massive changes and fluctuations doon sa global currency markets, no? So, may mga eksperto dyan na nag-share ng kanilang opinion on why peso is not really weak but it's dollar that is strong. But obviously, anyone who's familiar with financial markets as much as they're familiar with power knows that everything's relative, no? So the strength of one is usually means the weakness of the other. And by the way, we're gonna have some data and analysis on why actually some countries, developing countries, are having better currency right now. Actually, umakyat yung value ng currency of some of developing countries, and some of our neighbors, especially Singapore, were able actually to maintain a good exchange rate with US and avoid massive depreciation despite everything is happening in the US. So to explain this as, dahil lang safe haven ng US, kaya lahat pupunta doon, actually, it's a little bit more complicated than that. So let's try to break that down, guys, and also discuss ano bang posibleng direksyon ng Philippine peso in absence of a decisive response by Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas at saka by the Philippine government. No? Pag-usapan natin yan at titignan natin kung pwedeng umabot ang Philippine peso to dollar exchange to as what? Or rather, US dollar to peso exchange as high as 60, 65, or 66, 67, 68, as some experts have said it. So, pag-usapan natin guys yan, ha? So, just to make it simple, you cannot say hindi nag-weak yung isa-isa lang strong because everything is relative when it comes to currencies, right? Just like power. And second, to just say US is a safer haven, that's why everyone's going there, doesn't explain the fact that actually some countries had their currencies improving in recent months. And I'm not talking about rich countries, I'm talking about developing countries. So let's look at the data, guys. This is how we do proper analysis, all right? Again, hindi ito lecture proper. So I'm just gonna give you a very, let's say, broad brush strokes of the factors you have to look at para may literacy tayo in terms of analysis of what's happening around the world. So just on my Twitter kanina, I showed a graph. I showed the data kung saan nakikita nyo, guys, bakit actually, if you look at it, in some countries, right, the currency actually improved. So it's not a common picture. So let me show this to you guys. Yan, para makita natin yung full picture. Okay, don't worry mga ka-YouTube natin dyan. So ito right off the bat, let me put this out there, no? So actually, a currency of a number of countries, as you can see, improved over the past months or so. Nag-improve actually in currency ng iba. So you can see the currency, for instance, of Uruguay and Brazil, currencies of Russia because of massive intervention by Kremlin in order to make sure na hindi babaksak yung kanilang economy with the sanctions. Case of Angola. So a number of developing countries actually saw their currencies improve over the past year or so. So to say that ito ay dahil lang mas safe haven ng US, it doesn't explain why actually some countries have improving currencies in recent months. No? So this is the data we got from New York Times, so you can check it. I'll post the link later on, right? So this is the first thing you have to keep in mind. The situation whereby actually the currency is improving for a number of countries. So let's look at the data kasi. Huwag tayo mag-ano dyan. Poetic. It's not you, it's me. Yan. Alright. Now, obviously, the picture is much more complicated, but let me show you another fact. Again, data tayo, guys. Pakita natin yung situation. It's more... Actually, guys, if you look at it, some of our neighboring countries, like Singapore, Singapore was actually able to avoid a major fall in its currency despite the increase in US Federal Reserve interest rates. And by the way, it's not just because safe haven ng US currency. It's also because the US, by increasing yung interest rates niya, is making investment or deposits in their banks more profitable. Dahil kung umakyat ang interest rate sa US banks, then that means you get more profit for whatever deposits you make in US banks. It's as simple as that, guys. All right? Simple lang yan. Hindi yan rocket science. So, again, there are many factors at play here that we'll discuss. Kaya later on, let's briefly discuss ano pwede ang maging direction ng US Federal interest rate hike, and if ever we should worry for even further declines in Philippine currency in the coming months, no? I'm just gonna bring out yung announcement also by US Federal Reserve. So, ang forecast nila is until next year pa ang magre-raise ng interest rate. So, we're in the 3% plus territory. So, it could go up to 4.6% yung Federal Reserve hike. Again, don't worry guys, i-explain ko sa inyo yan. Huwag kayong magpanic dyan. Yung iba naman, I'm sure you know this very well, but just for the purpose of ating mga kaibigan dyan. So, actually, there's more to come. So, brace for more changes because as the US Federal Reserve made it clear, there's more hike to come. So, the Federal Reserve actually in a press conference last month, projected further rate hike dun sa kanilang interest rate to 4.6% before inflation fighting ends. Kasi medyo mataas ang inflation rate ng US. So to slow down the economy, they're increasing the interest rate para yung borrowing cost goes higher, consumer spending costs go higher, yung credit card interest rate goes higher, car loan, house loan, mortgage, all of those rates are gonna go higher. So if people spend more, people spend less and invest less, then that could slow down the inflation. That's the hope of the Federal Reserve in the US. So it's a much more complicated picture. Now, we're in the mid 3% territory right now. So the Fed is saying they can go up to 4.6%. So up to 25-30% increase pa we can expect over the next 6 to 9 months. No? So yun ang mga titignan natin ngayon. So this is the situation, guys, we're looking at. No? Alright, again it's not you, it's me, yung mga ganyan. Hindi pwede yan. Medyo more complicated ang situation. So, as I discussed a while ago, guys, actually, some countries had their currencies improving in recent months vis-a-vis the US, or at least in the case of Singapore, they were able to hold on to their currency because of the decisive response dun sa Central Bank of Singapore. No? So, it's a complicated picture. It's not just simple this or that, no? Wait lang, natanggal ko na naman sarili natin dito. So again, so this is a data that shows actually in some cases, this is the appreciation that they saw in their currency. So more than 5% for Uruguay, under 5% for Brazil, more than 25% in the case of Angola, Russia. So there are a number of countries that actually saw their currencies improving, guys, not depreciating in recent months. And that has a lot of complicated explanations, including yung terms of trade nila, the products that they have been exporting, etc. Yan na naman, delete natin ng sarili natin. Alright, balik tayo sa sarili natin. So, again, let's look at the data. Alright, let's look at the data. So, there are a number of factors that explain bakit malakas ang dollar, or at least malakas ang dollar from a 2-decade perspective. So, let me show you guys the dollar strength from a decade-long perspective para lang mag-gets nyo what we're talking about. So this is the dollar rates, right? So if you look at the US dollar index vis-a-vis other major currencies, it's more or less where it was in 2002, no? Slightly higher than that, no? So nakita natin dito sa graph. So this is US dollar index. So the power of US dollar versus other currencies between 2002 all the way to 2022. No, so this is it's an index that comprises yung Euro, Japanese yen, and British pound. So US dollar versus other top currencies. So nakita natin it's the highest in the past 2 decades and comparable to numbers in 2002. No, so yun po yung situation na tinitingnan natin. So historically, this is quite high, but as I said earlier, in the 21st century, we had similar numbers there, no? So you have to explain, why is the dollar so strong? Why do we even care about US dollar? No, why is it such a big factor? And what are the things that we are going to look forward to? So again, simplify lang natin to, guys. I'm not going to promise a full lecture yan. Mag-enroll na lang kayo sa class natin, International Political Economy, etc. You're free to do that, no? So yan, balikan natin ito. Wait lang ah. Sorry, ang dami mga nag-invitation sa akin, including my government agency yata. Okay. Sorry, ang dami. Okay. Now, let me give you guys a little bit of background on this. No? Why is the US dollar so strong to begin with? No? Why is it such a dominant currency? Bakit may paki tayo sa US currency to begin with? Very quickly, I'll give you some background on this. Hopefully, in the future methods, we can have more time discussions on this. As I said, So one way to understand it, I really suggest guys to read these books. It's a fantastic book called The Battle of the Bretton Woods, John Maynard Keynes, Harry Dexter White, and the Making of the New World Order. So this is really a fantastic book, guys, because it helps you to understand what is the architecture, no? What is the architecture that allowed for the dominance of the US currency? Ayusin natin yan, guys. Alright, so this is the book that allows you to understand that. The Battle of Bretton Woods. It's written by Ben Stell. Really good book, properly explains everything like that. Of course, there's so many other books I can suggest, including Capitalism 4.0 by Anatoly Kaletsky, among others. Ang dami pa. But this one is very, very interesting, mga kameta. Ayusin natin yan. Because in this book, you get to understand that the dollar became the de facto global currency reserve by design. Not because, again, perceptions of investors per se, that's true to a certain degree, but that perception is anchored on an architectural design of the global international order. Again, pasensya na mga kameta kung medyo nagiging jargonist tayo. But to simplify the story, ganito kasi, after the Second World War, John Maynard Keynes, a top economist from Cambridge University, isa sa mga tao na I really look up to and have followed his works. A number of his biographies are up back here in our mini library here. So if you look at it, what John Maynard Keynes had in mind is the creation of an international currency to make sure na hindi mangyari yung nangyari in the earlier decades of the 20th century, kung saan countries were cheating each other through the beggar the neighbor so-called policy, kung saan ibababa nila yung value ng currency nila para maging mas mura yung exports nila at maging mas mahal yung imports ng ibang bansa. And by doing that, by trying to cheat each other, by manipulating their currencies, ang tawag dyan mercantilist policy, what happens is that you create trade war. And when you have trade war, that creates geopolitical tensions, and it also kind of contributed to or reinforced yung great economic depression na nangyari just before Second World War. So John Maynard Keynes, who observed the peace conference, Versailles conference after the First World War, and very much was observing how things went wrong in the coming decades and leading up to the Second World War. Once natapos ng gyera or patapos ng gyera in the mid-1940s, ang suggestion niya sa Amerika was come up with international institutions that ensure continuous trade, walang cheating, minimal ang cheating, and we continue to open up countries to more and more economic interdependence. And through that, we ensure walang Great Depression. Through that, we ensure that we reduce poverty, we facilitate reconstruction, and at the same time, with more economic interdependence comes less reason for war, more reason for cooperation and amity. Again, I'm very much simplifying this. Now, the problem though was John Maynard Keynes was coming from a falling empire, Britain, which was almost pathetic by the end of Second World War. By the end of Second World War, the US alone was responsible for half of global GDP output. It was the supreme power of the era. It was the supreme victor of Second World War, no? And then Soviet Union, not a little bit far behind a second. Now, what happened is that H.D. White, not very, let's say, accomplished economists and academic, he had a showdown with John Maynard Keynes during the discussions on the creation of the international financial institutions that today we know very much about. International Monetary Fund, World Bank. There used to be the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs. Later on, you had the World Trade Organization. All of these major international financial institutions that we talk about, that are the guardians of the international order, their roots goes back to these very intense discussions between H.D. White and John Maynard Keynes, and by extension between U.S. and some of its key allies, while they were trying to create a new international order after the Second World War. Okay? So I'm keeping this very, very simple, guys. Okay. So, andyan pa ba kayo? Wait lang, let me make sure. Baka mamaya na-disconnect na naman tayo. Ayan, let me make sure andyan pa rin kayo guys. Andyan ba kayo? Ayan, mukhang okay pa naman tayo. Okay, so let me go back to this guys and try to explain this to you. So, again, I'm very much simplifying this. So what happened was that even though John Maynard Keynes was the intellectual superior and definitely had a clear idea where the world should go for the post-war order, he was essentially bullied by H.D. White or outmaneuvered by H.D. White because H.D. White had the backing of the U.S. government, right? And eventually what happened is that the U.S., to preserve its hegemony, and for a couple of other reasons, I'm sure there are apologies for that, made sure that the US dollar will be the global currency. Hindi ko sinasabi na dinadayaan nila, pero sinigurado nila na silang parating panalo. Alright? Na yung currency ng Amerika ay pinaka-dominant. That is why, even if in the 1970s and 80s, may crisis sa Amerika, even if 2007 and 8, may economic crisis naman sa Amerika, even if more recently, may economic crisis sa Amerika, because the whole global economic architecture was designed by H.D. White and by the United States, it has always made sure that the US dollar has a de facto dominance. No? Kaya for China or anyone to challenge that, they have to completely revamp the global architecture, economic architecture, which is very, very complicated. Now, let's not also forget that when it comes to World Bank and IMF, the two big international financial institutions, the so-called Bretton Woods institutions, kasi it was after the Bretton Woods meeting that the ideas that undergirded them came into being. They tend to be always, well, they're historically always ruled by an American and a European who's kind of friendly to America. So the US not only ensured the hegemony of US dollar, ang ginawa rin ng Amerika, sinigurado niya yung kanyang mga bata niya, are in charge of these top international financial institutions. So we have a weird situation whereby even if US economy is no longer as dominant, it's no longer half of the global GDP, it's barely a quarter of the global GDP, still the US has veto power inside these top international financial institutions. So countries like China, emerging economies like China for instance, are underrepresented dun sa mga international financial institutions na yan. So, in short, again, this is really a simplification. I suggest you guys go and read this book, The Battle of Bretton Woods, para you understand why the US dollar became so dominant in our international system. And that it's not going to be so easy for China or any other country to just replace it. Now, there are theories or hypotheses for that matter that say the advent of digital currencies might change it, a collapse in US economy might change it. But, you see, speculative yan eh. Like we saw with Bitcoin how unstable this is. We saw with all of the scam going on in digital currencies. We saw with the crackdown by China and other countries on digital currencies how I would say medyo shaky yung argument na yan. Not to mention the Chinese renminbi is not fully convertible. So there's a lot of capital controls. Kaya many countries or many investors will not feel safe also investing in renminbi because any point can come and the Chinese government say you cannot take out the money, right? So there's very strict capital controls. So hindi fully liberalized yung tinatawag na capital accounts ng China. So renminbi cannot be a fully international currency unless it's fully convertible. But the full convertibility of renminbi of China means also the end of the hegemony of the Chinese Communist Party in terms of monetary policy in China, which will defeat the whole point of having the Communist Party of China as an authoritarian regime in charge of this massive economy, right? So in short, huwag kayong maniwala dun sa mga tapos ng US, ganito. No. Because parang ganito eh, parang may gangster ka, tapos, sige, wag na lang gangster. Let's say may big bro ka, kahit yung big bro mo matanda na and all, yung bahay na tinutuluyan nyo, the whole thing was made up to make sure na si big bro ang is charge. So his room is positioned in a way that he can monitor everyone, he has CCTV you get what I'm saying? So the big bro made sure that the whole architecture of the home will ensure his long-term hegemony, even though when big bro is a little bit not the super cool alpha guy he used to be. So even if lumalaki yung mga ibang kapatid niya, they cannot challenge him because he controls how the whole system operates. Do you get what I'm saying here? So I'm giving you a very simplified metaphor, no? No judgment, though. I mean, I'm just simplifying international economics for you guys in this sense. So please, I suggest check works like this so that you understand why the US dollar is so hegemonic and why it's not easy for China or any other country to just challenge it. Now, we also have historical precedents whereby the US actually bullied some of its own allies to to change their currency policy, their monetary policy, so that the US can maintain its hegemony, right? So for instance, this is what happened in the Plaza Accord in 1985 when the US bullied actually Japan and and even Germany to a certain degree, no? Uh, to make sure na hindi siya malagpasan ng kanyang allies. No, I mean, this is brutal geopolitics we're talking about, guys. So, just to give you some quick idea about this. So, during the 1980s, the US was worried that Japan is now number two, is challenging them, buying all of these top hot properties from Hollywood to New York. So, what they did is they couldn't accept it. They pressured them to change their monetary policy. So the US has a history of doing that. And in fact, Lighthizer, one of the guys who was a top negotiator, essentially bullying Japan to changing its monetary policy during that time, that guy was also in charge of trade policy of Trump when Trump was the president. So some of these figures from 1980s, Reagan era, are still around. No? So these are the things that we have to keep in mind. So let me just give you a quick idea. Para alam nyo na hindi tayo nag-invento dito. Everything here, guys, we say has a data, has a basis, there's a research behind that. Alright? Hindi yan basta-basta, haka-haka, it's not you, it's me, mga ganyan. Alright? Ayan. So this is the Plaza Accord. Now, I'm quoting, this is from Wall Street Journal, by the way, which is of course biased for financial industry and all. But it gives you an idea. So you can Google on your own the 1985 Plaza Accord and what on earth the US did to Germany and Japan during that time to make sure na hindi siya malagpasan, etc. Now, again, it's much more complicated than that. There's so much layers to this. As I say, this is not a lecture, but I'm just giving you an idea about how historically the US has consistently tried to translate its geopolitical hegemony and, for a long time, its economic hegemony into financial hegemony. So it's possible that the US will not be the biggest economy in the world in the next 5 to 10 years. China has already overtaken US in purchasing power parity, which takes into consideration, for instance, a Big Mac in China is much cheaper than a Big Mac in US. So the value of a dollar in China is different from a dollar in US. That's why you have the purchasing power parity index. No? But in nominal dollars, exchange rate, market rate dollars, actually China could soon become the biggest economy in the world. But that doesn't mean just because you have the biggest economy, you'll be the financial superpower. Because again, the whole architecture of the international system is dollar dominated, right? So during the crisis, a lot of countries from Singapore to Korea to Japan to EU, etc., they do dollar swaps, no? And a lot of investors go to the US. Now, but that's just part of the picture because there's another big part of this picture, which is the Federal Reserve hike that we talked about, guys, a while ago, diba? So as I said, the problem in the US right now is the massive increase in their inflation rate. So ang ginagawa ngayon ng US, guys, is they're increasing their interest rates because by increasing interest rate, it makes borrowing more expensive, investment more expensive, spending more expensive, and by extension, as I said, guys, pushes down inflation. No? So the US, again, just to show you, so US dollar actually became weaker in previous years because the US decreased its interest rates. Why it decrease it? Because it wanted to boost its growth rates. No? Simple as that. Well, it's not, I mean, there are multiple variables, but I'm trying to make you see that this is not rocket science. No? So actually, the US dollar was much weaker in the previous years because the interest rates of US was also weaker. If I could superimpose the US interest rates over the dollar strength, you'll see a strong correlation between the two of them, right? So the US dollar actually was much cheaper compared to other major currencies because the Federal Reserve also brought its interest rates close to zero in order to boost growth. Now that inflation goes high, they're pushing up the interest rate. That's also pushing up the value of the US dollar. So what are we looking at, guys, here? Now, what are we looking at here? Let me just get back again. Sorry, guys. No, not sorry. Because I want to show you something so that you have an idea where things could be going in the coming months, no? As I said, malalim na discussion yan. I don't want to make it overly complicated. It's just a meta. But it's not just meta, right? Our metas are different. All right. Now, let's go back to this, guys. So, there are speculations that peso could sink up to, ayan, next level tayo guys, up to, right, 65 to 68. Ito ay kay Joey Salceda. Because ayon kay Congressman Joey Salceda, oh, by the way, is very competent economist. Ibang usapan yung kanyang political analysis. But as far as his, may tayo dyan. As far as his economic analysis is concerned, I have a lot of respect for him. Now, I don't know, and I'm not sure if we go high as 68, 65 maybe, but it's very possible we go beyond 60, no? If the US Federal Reserve goes with another jumbo rate hike from the mid 3% all the way to lower 4%, right? Now, if they go by 25 basis points, maybe the hike will not be as much. But if they go by 50 basis points, 0.5%, to 75 basis points, 0.75%, then we boom, guys. We could look at something big. So, again, I know may information overload na tayo dito, right? So I'm not gonna overload you guys. But let me show you one thing. So, yan ang bantayan nyo, guys. Para you know what, I'm giving you a free advice already here. If you're doing currency speculation, you can make, you know what I'm saying, right? So this is what you're gonna watch, guys, in the coming weeks, because I'm also gonna watch that very carefully. Ito ang babantayan natin. Boom. So this is the schedule of the meetings, next meetings ng US Federal Reserve. And dito, most likely, so they have only 2 more meetings left, right? Only 2 more meetings left. And dito natin makikita if ever they're gonna press ahead with another Federal Reserve hike. So it's possible that US pesos will depreciate further before either October 31 to November 1, which is the next meeting, or by December. Although by December, because we expect our OFW na mga kapatid to send back more dollars, maybe that could help us to mitigate some of this. Or let's see what Bank of Central of the Philippines will do. Because if the Bank of Central of the Philippines also raises interest rates so that investors will not just jump and go to US, maybe that could have a mitigating factor. Again, we saw in the case of Singapore, for instance, a proactive monetary policy was a little bit, more than a little bit helpful. So, guys, bantayan nyo itong mga dates na to, no? October 31 to November 1. Days before that, siguro, makikita na natin may currency fluctuations na. And the next one is December 12 to 13. Ang suspetsa ko dito, ito sa October 31 to November 1. So, siguro mga October 28, 29, we could see some interesting changes in the currency fluctuation. So kung ang expectation of the investors and speculators is that the next interest rate increase will be a jumbo one, meaning 75 basis point, 0.75% or 0.5 for that matter, and not 0.25, then medyo akyat siguro yan. Baka lalampas tayo ng 60. But if the US Federal Reserve is gonna go with 25 basis points and then spread it all over until end of first quarter of next year, then maybe by that time, guys, hindi ganun ka maging malakas yung depreciation of US pesos. Alright? Again, there are many factors there. It's very hard to predict currency directions because of many factors. But what I can tell you guys as my advice is bantayan nyo itong mga upcoming meetings ng US Federal Reserve before October 31. So days before that, we have to have an idea already about currency fluctuations. And then the other one in December. Alright? But really, this October one before the end of month, and then November 1, that's really for me the big one. Alright? So yun So yun. I'll keep it here. So in short, what I'm saying is that it's very complicated. There are many factors coming together, but it's not rocket science. As I said, I try to simplify it to you guys by showing, first of all, the architecture of the international order inherently favors dominance of US dollar, even when US is no longer as economically dominant as it used to be, no? Second, this is not just about US being safer. This is also about the rate hike in US Federal Reserve, which makes deposit in US dollar and US banks more favorable, or if you buy treasury bonds for that matter, more and more favorable. And then, of course, we also have to look at what is the response of our different countries, including the Philippines, for instance, in terms of our monetary policy. And as I said, there are countries that actually saw their currency appreciate or hold steady in recent months, as I showed you guys in this graph. So makikita na dito sa graph na yan. These are the countries actually who saw the value of their currency improve in the past year, no? And of course, you compare that to the Philippines, whereby there was a significant drop in our currency value, and to say that this is all just about US dollar strength, it's you, it's not me, I'm not sure that's the most sophisticated thing. So just to give an idea, this has been the direction of Philippine US versus dollar over the past year. So if you take a year and year, so increasing value in dollar versus our currency. But in the case of Uruguay, Brazil, some of these countries, we actually saw the opposite, their currency improving versus the US dollar, right? Based on this data that we got from New York Times. Of course, the situation is still fluid. A lot still can change. But as I said, for instance, Singapore shows that you can keep your currency quite stable with proactive monetary policy. And of course, I mean, given naman Singapore also has some structural advantages that the Philippines doesn't have, right? So here, I'm not blaming anyone per se. I'm just saying this is how things work. So, bahala kayo sa buhay nyo. Analyze niyan. Let's see where things are going. So, it's not you only. It's me also. It's you and me. Ito na naman tayo. Alright? Ayan mga kameta, may mga tanong kayo dyan sa YouTube, sa Facebook. Ano po yung mga tanong natin dyan? Tingnan natin yung mga tanong ng mga kaibigan natin. I hope guys you appreciate what we're trying to do here, which is to have a much more, alam niya na, di ba? Hindi lang yung mga marites. Ito totoong analysis na to guys. Alright. Any questions there guys? Yan. Talaga, ganun ang gusto kong meta. Honestly, I'm enjoying this. Hopefully we can do more of this. But guys, I hope you understand. Medyo energy ko. Alright. Medyo effort yan. You know, it takes a lot of research and background analysis on how to do this. So, sana naman, baka naman, pwede kayo magbigay ng stars and support dyan. Wala tayong team, wala tayong production team. Sariling sikap lang yan. Alright, so please. So, ito mga kameta, bantayan nyo. October 26, 27, 28 pa lang, dapat medyo ma-idea na tayo on speculations about the next Fed rate hike. At the same time, bantayan din yung Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, ano mang ginang policy niya in response to potential changes to almost certain rate hike by US. Tatapatan ba natin? What are we gonna do? Are there gonna be more interventions by the BSP? Tignan natin yan, alright? So, kung kayo po ay meron nagpapadala sa inyo ng OFWs, diba? Or kayo po ay engaging in dollar-denominated transaction, etc. Yan, I think this meta will be very much helpful to you guys. Alright? Maraming salamat. Thank you very much guys. Let me say thanks sa lahat ng mga nagbigay ng suporta sa atin, ng mga comments, suggestions. Ito walang bardagulan. Totoong analysis na ito guys. Alright? Let me thank so much our friends. Sorry, I cannot read Chinese. Pero maraming salamat sa kaibigan natin. Yan. Kaibigan natin from Phoenix, Arizona. Alright. Thank you very much kay Jocelyn Lumberia. As always, maraming salamat. Thank you so much kay Eden Olonan. Thank you also to Mitch Tengcho, Rina Rodriguez Araujo, Ma Victoria Baltazar, Riz Ani, ayan, mga Joey, Mitch, ayan, Nikki Kate, Tere Sawai, Animo VJ, Steven Santillan Might. Thank you kay Ma'am Fanny San Miguel, Maricel Fidelis, Grace, Juvie Lanes, Joe Apostol, John Agner, Judge Rogelio, Joy Salva, Almirk Ortsak, Sunshine Mercado, Dol Camo, yan, Rodney, Ladigohon, Ronnie Vito, Romualdo Perez. Thank you so much sa lahat ng mga nagbigay ng support and comments. Thank you so much also dito sa mga kay YouTube natin, kay Alice Do, no? Among others for sending us stickers and support. Please guys, continue to support us para medyo maingganyo tayo. Hindi ito madali lang, right? This didn't come out of nowhere, no? This came out of years of research, years of teaching international political economy, and also guys, following up with all of the latest developments, data and all. Because sa tingin ko naman talaga malaking impact ito. If only I were more into Bitcoin and all, yung mga dodgy, shady na yan, I would have given a meta on that. But maybe guys, we have to do an analysis on Bitcoins and digital currencies, etc. Basta alam nyo naman ako, I'm all over the place. I'm trying to analyze so many things. Wala akong social life. Di pa tayo kasal. So habang pa tayo, di pa tayo kasal and all, legally single, unmarried, medyo I'll try to do as much analysis as I can, no? So thank you so much for your support and suggestions. So yun lang, ayaw ko yung mga hugot line. It's not you, it's me, yung mga ganun. Hindi. Hindi yan ubra sa akin. Alright guys, thank you very much. Maraming salamat. God bless. Talk to you soon. Thank you rin din sa inyo mga Mga kameta natin dyan.